All right, 9.5, math makes sense. This is, I think, the last section in the entire course.
Yes.
Isn't that exciting?
Yeah.
It's the last section. Let's see. Chapters 1 through, the last one is 9, and the last section is 9.5. Look at that. Designing a project plan. All right, so this year you guys are going to be doing a project, a statistical or a probabilistic project, so something to do with probability, where you test things, you experiment with things, you gather some data, or statistics, where you either ask a survey question or you research some data, or you take some measurements yourself and plot this stuff in a graph and learn something from what you find out. So I'm going to get you to do a project. We're going to learn some of the important key pieces of preparing for and carrying out and presenting a project. So we're going to talk about a project plan here today. And this is not only good for this class, this is good for lots of classes. All of these sections are really important for you to know about so that you can plan any kind of project. So, all right, here we go. So with your notes in front of you, there's some blanks I want you to fill out. And the goal here today is to create an effective project plan that is free of bias. So we talked about bias. We're going to try and come up with a good topic that you're interested in, a good question that you can ask that's free of biases and good language and everything like that. We're going to talk about how to collect data and any problems we might occur there. So there are 5 important factors to consider when designing a project plan. This is also in your Math Makes Sense textbook. So you can see these in there. I've given you some examples too of kind of good examples and poor examples to avoid. So wording, okay, prepare the question. Wording should avoid biases, be culturally and personally sensitive, okay? So a good question here. The first one is good. This is a good question, example of a good question. It says this: which brand of toothpaste is preferred by grade 9 students at my school? That's a great question. There's no bias in there. There's no intimidation. There's no insensitivity. There's no misuse of language. It's pretty flat. It's pretty robotic almost, you can think. There's nothing embedded in there that would skew the results or would make the results lean one way. A poor question, so this would be a poorly worded question. Okay, so a poor question. If you actually brush your teeth, don't you think Crest is the best toothpaste? So there's lots in here, isn't there? Like, first of all, you're coming across as being kind of rude, you know. I can't really tell, but I don't know if you brush your teeth or not, but like, looks kind of like your teeth is like, you know, like brutal. But anyways, if you actually do brush your teeth once in a month, do you use Crest? Okay, that's loaded with lots of stuff, right? So we don't want to ask a question like that. We kind of want to make it open, and you want to allow the person that's responding to be free to give you an honest response, whatever it is. So any comments on that or any questions about that? This is just one example, but any questions about that? Okay, so how you word your question is important. And of course, who you ask and how you ask them, and there would be different criteria for different groups of people. Maybe you would ask your friends a question maybe a little differently than you would ask your grandma or an older person in the community, maybe. Okay, so number 2, identify the population and possibly choose a sample. So are you going to ask everybody or are you going to ask the population? So this first category says 157 grade 9 students are in my school. I will choose every 5th person on the student list. So 157 people, that's a lot of people, and you may not have the time or the resources to ask all of them. So you're going to choose every 5th person on the student list. So is that a census? Is that asking the entire population, or is that asking a sample of the population? That's a sample, right? Good. You guys should know that. So that's a sample. And do you know what kind of sample is this from last lesson? Okay, systematic or interval sampling. That's right. Yeah, systematic sampling. And so if you only have 15 grade 9 students on this side here, and you're going to ask all of them, that is you're asking the entire population. So the word there is a census of the entire population of your grade 9 class. Okay? So if you were doing the same, we have a small enough class that you might want to ask everybody, right? Asking a sample of this class would be a little inappropriate, right? Because it doesn't take you much to ask the whole class. All right, number 3. So collecting the data is number 3. Consider timing and collection methods to avoid potential problems with data collection or the validity of the data. Okay, so poor choice for collection. I'm going to get you to say sort of why this is a poor choice. Here's the example. Students go to a corner store at 9 a.m. and ask the clerk how many ring pops have been sold that day. So ring pops are those the big, you know what ring pops are, right? The big diamond-shaped candy that goes on a little plastic ring, right? So what's the problem with this? If you go at 9 a.m. and ask the clerk how many have been sold so far today, and then write that number down for the entire day. What from the last couple sections, what would be the problem there? Yeah. Yes, I would say so too. Bad timing or poor timing. That's good. I would put that right there. Poor timing. Okay. So a good choice for collection, if we move straight across here, students go at the end of the day to the convenience store and ask how many ring pops have been sold for the day and use that number. That's a better idea if you're trying to get daily totals, right? Go at the end of the day. Or if you go at 9 a.m., don't ask for that day, but ask for maybe the previous day. They would have those numbers maybe the next morning as well. Okay? Now, if you were doing this for your actual project, okay, there's other things to consider. If you're going to actually do this and examine how many of a specific type of candy is sold in the store, you can't just show up to the store and ask the guy behind the desk, how many ring pops did you sell yesterday? Okay? You can't just show up and do that, right? You're going to have to go ahead of time and say, listen, I'm doing an experiment, I'm doing a probability or a statistical project at school, and I'm interested in how many ring pops, the certain candy, are sold in your store, and I want to gather some data. Is it okay if I come in and ask you about the sales for the previous day? Well, you might have to talk to my manager. Okay, can I please talk to your manager briefly then about that? Yes, you can. So you talk to the manager, and they may say, listen, we're just too busy. We don't write that stuff down. That only shows up in our books at the end of the month. Stuff like that. You know what I mean? It might not be possible. So don't just expect to go into a store and have them just give you all the information you need and leave. You have to kind of think this through because you're dealing with people, you're dealing with other situations, okay? So just a heads up. This might come up a little bit later. And I think that would be something great for you to gather some data on. Maybe if you know a store owner or if you have some connections, might be a good idea too, to go that way because they might be a little bit more able to or willing to help you. All right, another example. This person asks grade 11 students how many hours of homework their siblings in grade 9 do in a week. Okay, so what's that going to yield us, or what's the problem there? What do you think? Yeah. Okay, some might not have siblings, right? That's true. Yeah. If you want to know what grade 9s do, what maybe you should ask grade 9s. So what do you have to say? So wrong people. So a couple things here. This is going to be like audience. Okay, so you might want to pay attention to the audience. Okay, and I would also say here. So I would put audience here. You should probably ask the grade 9s if you want to know about the grade 9s, if you can. And also, this is definitely going to be lead you to invalid conclusions. So audience, and then I would say this is going to be totally invalid because you're right, there's a lot of problems there. Invalid conclusion. Okay. So maybe what you should do is go ahead and ask the actual grade 9 students themselves how many hours they did in a week. Okay? So yeah, that's great. Now, if it's not possible to ask the grade 9 students, so let's say you're in a school that's only a 10 to 12 school. You have grades 10 to 12 in a school, and you are doing a project on, grade 9 students. There's no grade 9 students in your school. You only know a handful that you can message or talk to. So maybe that might be not a bad idea to ask the grade 10s or 11s or 12s about their siblings in grade 9. So it might be okay, but you have to be careful with that, right? You might have an invalid, conclusion because you're not going directly to the source. Okay, things to think about. Number 4, analyze and display the data. So you have to choose an appropriate method of display of your data. And of course, the analyzing basically means, what do these numbers mean? What have I learned from this? How has this informed me? Okay, what does this say? What do these numbers actually say about the big question, right? So let's say for displaying data, a paragraph listing the number of hours students slept over the last week. So you've asked students their sleeping habits, and you just write this down as a paragraph. Okay, so Melanie slept 5 hours on average this last week. Abby slept an average of, right? And so you just write it in a paragraph. That's probably a poor choice for displaying data. So I would say this would be poor choice here for displaying the data. A paragraph for something like this wouldn't be good. Instead, maybe a bar graph or a line graph. Well, a line graph, if it's between people, there's no connection between two people usually, so you wouldn't have a line connecting those points. Instead, you would have maybe like a bar graph or something like that, just indicating that they are separate. And we talked about this, I think, before in math class, right? We talked about these graphing methods. So use a bar graph to show the number of hours of sleep. Okay, that would be a good choice for this section here is good choice, okay, for displaying data. All right, so let's talk about analysis, okay? Stating hours of sleep for each person. If you listed the person with a number of hours behind each name or in a graph and said nothing else, about the data and what it might say to us, what you could learn from that, what that might mean, what factors are involved, or this would be poor analysis, okay? Poor analysis. So when you're developing your project, you're going to want to consider factors that contribute to the number of hours of sleep, okay? So if you just say, what's your favorite color? Something like that. That's not a great project, okay? What's your favorite color? This person red, this person blue. Okay, 5 reds, 3 blues, 2 yellows. Okay, that's something that kids in grade 2 would probably do, and then be done with it, right? So you want to pick a question, a topic that you can analyze a little bit. You need to use your brains, start to put some factors together, and realize, okay, so why do people get a lot of sleep? Like, why is that? Or why do these people average very small amount of sleep? What are the effects of that? What are the causes of that? So kind of pull some factors together. It should be a little bit multi-layered, which is where your analysis will be very thorough. So good analysis would be identifying any trends. I'm going to put 2 words here. I'm going to put trends. That would be a minimum analysis. Okay. Trends in sleep patterns of weekdays versus weekends, providing learning opportunities for your report readers. So I'm going to say trends or factors. Okay, that was the other word that I used, factors. So good analysis, identifying any trends or factors. So if you notice that all the girls get more sleep than the boys, that's a trend. And that's kind of the first level of analysis. You say, hey, I haven't just listed people in hours. I've actually noticed that generally the girls get more sleep than the boys. Okay, that's a trend. Good job, okay? That's a little bit of analysis. Going further, what you should do is say, now why is that? Why is that? And you may ask a follow-up question, or maybe you're planning for that. How many hours of sleep do you get? How much homework do you do? What factors do you believe contribute to the number of hours you get? And you might get information like that. So you might be able to say, generally the girls get a little more sleep. I don't know if this is true, I'm just making this up. Generally girls get a little more sleep than boys, and it's because that the girls are a little bit more social. They spend more time on social media in the evening, and so they don't get to bed as early. Or you can say that, I found out that the boys get up a little bit earlier to eat a healthy breakfast, okay? Okay, I don't know, both those things might be laughable. I don't know, I'm just making this stuff up. So there could be reasons or factors for this, okay? So I want you to kind of go through the layers, all right? That's the kind of thinking I'm looking for. So any questions about anything here so far? Am I making myself clear about all this stuff? It feels pretty, you understand? Okay, there's one more thing, and for some reason this is not bolded. My mistake. I'll fix that on the other document, I guess. But the section number 5 is designing a grading rubric. Okay, how many of you have heard of the term rubric before? You've heard of that? Okay. So teachers use rubrics to grade certain aspects of a project or an assignment. And so we'll talk about what rubrics look like, but this should help you evaluate, okay? Evaluate the important components of the project. And yes, you are going to come up with your own rubric, and we're going to start working on that today. Okay, so on the next page here, we're going to talk about that 5th option there, the 5th section. So, the next page, creating a rubric for your project. Creating a rubric for your project. In this unit, in a unit problem, well, you're going to come up with your own unit problem, but you will collect data and present your findings. Your rubric must assess the following criteria. Okay, so if you are doing a survey question, okay, then it has to evaluate your question. Some of you might not be doing a survey statistics. You might be doing a probability experiment, okay? So your survey question, I would also put beside here as well your experiment goal, let's say, or experiment purpose. Let's say purpose. Because if you're doing some probability aspect, you may have an experiment purpose as well. Experiment purpose or survey question, okay? That's number 1 there. So you'll also want to evaluate the choice of the sample that you're going to make, sample or the census, okay? Sample or census. I'll choose different colors so you know this is on a different line here. Okay? Or are you going to ask the entire population? Okay, so what would be a good choice? What do you think about in order to make this decision? Okay, so how the data were collected, no blanks there. So you want to assess how the data was collected. You would give yourself a lot of points if you collected the data appropriately for your situation, for your question, okay? If you actually had a small class and you want to know everyone's sleeping habits, if it's not too private, that might be too private, but if you want to ask, how many hours of sleep they would get on average in a week, then you would probably ask the whole class, right? So you would say something like, if the number of people asked was, let's say, less than 25, I would do a census. I would sample, or I would ask the entire population. If it's more than 25, I would use a sample. So stuff like that. How you would evaluate that. Okay, the next one, how to display your data. So display of your data. Okay, so what kind of graph would you use, or would you use a graph at all, or something different? Your conclusions. So the conclusions you made. And I will help you. You'll see in the bottom half of your page, I have these categories, so we'll work on this together. And then your presentation. So the goal is towards the end of the semester here, the last couple days, that we'll hear from the groups, just a brief presentation on what you did and what you learned. Okay, I would like to be able to share this information with your class, so that it's not only you that's learning, but think about it, if you can learn a lot about your project and your question and how you did things, but you can also learn about 5 or 6 or 7 other interesting projects. If you could do that would be so much better. I would love if we could learn from each other. So we're probably going to have a bit of a presentation time. Okay, your rubric should have 4 levels of achievement. Okay, before we get into this, what sort of problems may arise? Problems may arise if a person does not consider. So what do we need to consider? The first one would be bias. Okay, so even in your evaluation, make sure in your evaluation you mention something about bias, okay? Or you consider that as part of your evaluation somehow. You give yourself a really good mark if your question is free from bias. You would give yourself a poor mark there if your question included some bias or some problem. So also use of language. So this is just a little bit of a list from factors that we've done before. Yeah. Yeah, so, well, examples of biased questions would be like the toothpaste one, right? Like, don't you think Crest is the best toothpaste? Right? That would be kind of like you're expressing your bias. So you want to be free from that sort of thing. Yeah, we'll go over the rubric a little bit and maybe you'll understand that a bit better. But ethics would be another one, okay? Ethics is a broad category, but is this an appropriate question? Is this an ethical question? Is it okay for you to be asking this question or to be doing this experiment, right? You want to see, how many times your baby brother would fall out of the crib if you like propped him on the edge of the railing. Let's see, which way does he fall? Towards the cushion or onto the splat onto the floor? Let's see. Okay, oh, floor. Okay, all right. No, it's okay. You're all right. Don't cry. Okay, trial number 2. Floor. Okay. So you wouldn't want to do that one. Okay, that's unethical. Yes, I know, tempting, but no, you can't do it. No. Cost and time. Cost and time. Sorry to plant those seeds in your head. I'm sick. I know it. Cost and time. So obviously, if it's going to take you 3 weeks to gather this data and you only have 4 days, yeah, you reconsider. Also timing, which is different than time, right? So timing. So when are you going to ask the question? Or what kind of question would be appropriate for this time of year or for during school hours or whatever? Privacy. These should be ringing the bell here. Cultural sensitivity and so on. Okay. Now we did add a few more to our list, including audience, sensitivity. Right? Was this a 9.3 or 4? Is that 9.3? 2 even? Maybe was it 2? We went over this? 9.2? Where it, or 1? I'm trying to find this chart. You sure it was 2?
Yeah, it was the table.
Yeah, where's the table thingy? There we go. Okay. So we added audience and subjectivity. Okay, so are there standardized responses? So yeah, you want to consider these ones as well, audience and subjectivity. So they're all in here. I mean, we didn't mention all of them. We just mentioned a select few. But please look back to this list for a complete, for your complete answers there. Okay, let's get back. Oh wait, what? Yeah, 9.5 right here. Okay, so audience and subjectivity could be added there as well. All right, so let's take a look at the rubric. Let's take a look at the rubric. So I've kind of set this up for you a little bit. I've done the first one for you. So let's examine this. You don't have to list every possible conceivable thing that you could or couldn't or want to stay away from. It can be a little general, but this is kind of an idea of how you might want to approach this. Now I've put the 4 points, which is the maximum points. And obviously this is what you want to aim for in each section, right? If you had a 4 out of 4 for each section, you would get 100% on your project. So that's what you're aiming for. Now, don't make the number 4 category, don't make the criteria too low. So it's like, oh, I'm going to get 100% because I'm just going to make this like pretty lame. Like all I have to do is this. No, I want you to strive for perfection as much as you can, or something that's extremely well thought out. And then work your way down to only 1 point for the category, which would represent or describe a very poor, outcome for this section. Okay, so for example, question number a 4 point. This is just my idea here. Okay, question was free from bias, and that's the whole list of these things that we've talked about. Free from bias. It is extremely clear. The question is clear. It's not vague. They know exactly what they're answering. The question was proofread by another classmate. Oh, okay. So to get 4 out of 4, something that you should do is show at least one of their classmates and have them another set of eyes on it, another brain to think about this, to make sure that you have checked off all the boxes, okay? So that would be an example of a 4 out of 4. And notice, the nice thing about a rubric is, it's kind of like you just look at these things and make sure you've done all these things for a 4, and there's a pretty good chance you'll get a 4. Now, if I'm marking this, I will probably have my own rubrics, but should be similar to what you're going after, and I'm evaluating your rubrics, right? So I'm evaluating your evaluation, okay? And I will show you my rubrics later so that you know what to expect. But it's good for you to just see, hey, okay, I got to take care of bias, I got to be clear, and I have to have it proofread. Boom. If you do those three things, and I see and evaluate that you've done those three things well, boom, you get a 4 out of 4 there. Got it? Now, a 3. So question may have been slightly biased. So in reading your question, maybe you and your proofreader missed the fact that you're asking about Christmas in July, and it might not be the best, okay? Now, asking about Christmas in June, I guess we're in June, asking about Christmas in June is not the worst thing in the world, but is it a great choice, okay? I don't know, depends on your question, actually. Depends on your question. So, do you think about Christmas presents in June? That could be your question. Do you plan ahead in June for Christmas presents? And what sort of factors contribute to that? Okay? That may be a great question. So you're asking about Christmas in June, but the whole point is, do you think about Christmas a long ways away from Christmas, right? Like exactly, half a year away from Christmas, let's say. Do you think about it? So that's a good question. But it may be like, so, what did you get for Christmas? What presents did you get for Christmas? Dude, it was like 6 months ago. I can't remember. That's bad timing, right? That's not a good one. Okay. Or that was unclear, or the timing there. Okay, I'm talking a lot here, but so it was clear and it was proofread. So to get a 3, you still have to have a very clearly stated question, and it does still have to be proofread, let's say. You would get a 2 if the question certainly was biased. You really didn't take care of that, and it was unclear. So in this case, I've set a 2 to being both biased and unclear, even though it was proofread. So notice that the proofread thing, you have to have the proofread thing to get anything over a 1. Okay? That's pretty important. And sometimes teachers build really important things into all levels of their rubric because it's something you absolutely have to do. So if it's really important, it should be mentioned very early on, like in the lowest categories as well, if it's super, super important. Yeah, question?
How are you going to know if the question is proofread? Is someone going to have to sign it?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe. Someone might have to sign the proofread part, sure. Yeah, I might have a proofread signature box. Who knows? Yeah, that's right. Good question. Okay. So you get 1. Now, I didn't put a space for 0. I probably could have put a space for 0. I should have put a space for 0, actually. I'm assuming that no one's going to get 0, but you could have a space for 0 as well. So question was absent. There was no question. You get 0, right? Maybe. Okay. So you could actually put that in as well, but I didn't. But so number 1, you get 1 out of 4 if the question, you had a question obviously, it was biased, it was confusing, and it wasn't proofread. So if you don't check off any of the boxes, then you would just get a 1 out of 4. So this is making sense, is it? Or do you have a question about what I've talked about so far with the rubric? Let me ask that question free from bias. Do any of you have any questions about anything I've said in the last little bit? Do you guys understand this, really? Like, are you getting this or what? I'm learning too. So does anyone have any questions about what I've said in the last few minutes here? Yes?
So we have to fill this out, right?
So you have to fill this out right. Yes, correctly.
What would be an example of like the sample problems? What does that also mean?
Okay, all right, okay. So anything that I've said, I'm moving on to that one. So this is all good so far? The concept of the rubric, sort of what kind of pieces were in this question. Now, yes, you're going to fill out the rest. The category, so as I mentioned before, your choice of sample or census. Some of these may be a little bit tougher, but like I said, you would get a 4 out of 4 if you put something like the choice between a sample and population was very clear because there was more than 30 participants, or there was more than 30 people in the population. Okay, so more than 30 people in the population, appropriate sample or population was decided upon. Or you could say something like 4 out of 4 is any number of people over 25 was a sample, and people under 25 was a population. Okay, and that was made clear. That the reasoning was clear. You can also put something like that in. So the reasoning was clear. That would be important for 4 out of 4. So this is it's up to you. Yeah, some of this is not real easy, but that's kind of up to you. So 4 out of 4 in choosing a sample or population, what sort of criteria do you think a 4 out of 4 would be? So your reasoning was clear, and you might want to put there was more than 25 people in. So I don't even know if you want to put a number in there, but you can decide that. And then down to number 1, no consideration was made for deciding on a sample or population. Okay, or no reasoning was given for choosing a sample or population. No reasoning. And it could be number 3 was, reasoning was provided but unclear. And then very little reasoning was provided, and then 1 was no reasoning was provided. Okay. Or you might want to say it chose a sample with over 25 people, stuff like that. You might want to put that in there. This is up to you to now decide. But you're right. That's probably one of the trickier ones. Data collection. So you would get a 4 out of 4 if you collected your data appropriately, and what would that look like? What would that look like? So if you were doing a probability experiment, let's say you would have to decide on the number of times that you perform the experiment to get an honest, a reliable result. So you can't do, if you're doing an experiment, you can't just do it once or twice and say, oh, this is the real, maybe you'd have to do it more than 50 times, or if you're rolling dice, or if you're, doing some probability of some other event, maybe you have to do it at least 50 times to get a legitimate, reliable answer. Or if you're conducting a survey, the survey was given to more than so many students, it was clear and proofread. Okay? Or, it's up to you. You can build this in. So I just kind of want to see your thinking on this. Okay? There is no right or wrong for these, but I just want to see the levels of your thinking. So this would be not very much marks for data collection, right? You asked one person, okay? Or you asked less than 5 people your question. Or you performed your experiment less than 5 times, or whatever. You didn't record your data. I don't know, it's poor, right? And this was awesome. Display, okay, so data display. How did you choose to display your data? And what did it look like? Was it digitally made or was it handmade? What would be a 4 out of 4 in your mind? So I would start with 4 out of 4. What's 4 out of 4 in your mind? Your conclusions. How do we know your conclusions are reliable? What's a 4 out of 4 for a good conclusion? Okay? Did you analyze your data and use the analysis in your conclusion? I want to put something like that. And presentation. So how did you present, or what would a good presentation look like? You spoke slowly and clearly and included all pertinent data or all important data, and your technology worked well, and you answered all questions. Okay, something like that. That would be a 4 out of 4, let's say. And then work down from there. So for this project, we have 6 sections at 4 possible points each. And yes, there would be a 0. There will be a 0 on mine, obviously, if you just miss something or give no reasoning, or there's no conclusion, or whatever. If you don't present or whatever, there could be 0, yeah, if just nothing is produced. But so we have a total of 24 points here, and they would kind of come from this rubric. Now, you wouldn't use your rubric for your grading, probably. I'm grading how you would build your rubric. I will have a rubric that I will use for your project, and you will be able to see that, okay? That rubric as well. After this is done, you'll be able to see the rubric I will use. Questions? Okay, last page. Let's quickly get to the last page. I talked to you about this already, but this page is set up for you to do some brainstorming. So brainstorming is thinking of all possible options that you might have. So write things down. Topics I'm interested in. Okay, how many times baby brother will fall to the crib? Okay, well, we're going to stroke that one off, but that might be something you're interested in. You sick person, you. You might be interested in, probability of winning a certain game. You might be interested in the probability of someone making it to the NFL. You might be interested in, the number of hours of sleep that a typical grade 9 student gets in a week. Okay, so the topics would be general. So chances of making it to a professional sports league. Hours of sleep you could even put for just topics you're interested in. Doesn't have to be specific. Hours of sleep that the average teenager gets, or I don't know how many 3-pointers our basketball team scored this year. Like what's the percentage, or I don't know, just basketball, hockey, chess, art, sales of art pieces. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a bunch of different range of things, right? So topics. Now, then you want to go over here and you want to maybe look at the ones you're interested in and say, which of these topics could I collect data for? So if I wanted to do like the 3-point percentage of our basketball teams this year, maybe compared to other years, could I actually get that data? Do we have the stats from this year? So you'll have to kind of you could write that down and say, I probably could because the teams took stats, but now how do you access those stats and blah, blah, blah. So you have to start thinking about that way. Topics I could collect data for. Art sales of art pieces, over the last 5 years or whatever. Yeah, you could probably look that up. That's good. Someone's favorite time of the year. Could you collect data for that? I guess so. Is that data, or is that like an opinion, or is there some kind of numbers? What kind of data could I collect for something like that? You know what I mean? So just narrow it down to things you can actually collect data for. Okay, I'll do this quick, but what biases or other considerations? So you could write down the list of things that you considered. Now, what's the specific question? So go from a general topic, something that you narrowed down, what biases you consider. Now think about a specific question, all right? And I will use the hours of sleep. On average, how many hours of sleep per night do grade 9 students at RCS get? During a school week. Okay, so that's specific. Not too specific that there's only like 1 or 2 answers, right? You don't want to be too specific. Do you like horses or cows? What? I mean, really? You're gonna do that's your project? So the specific question can't be too specific. But you don't want to leave it too open, right? What's your favorite thing? That's not a good question. What are you going to learn from that? Horses, butterflies, shooting 3-pointers. The 3:30 bell when I can get to leave school. You got to narrow that down a bit. Black copper kettles and, what's that song? Anyways, these are a few of my favorite things. Okay, how will I collect the data? Are you going to do a survey? Are you going to actually, go down to Wascana Lake and do water samples and look under the microscope, and you're going to, record how many crawly things or moving things you see in there? I don't know. How are you going to collect the data? Are you going to ask people questions? Are you going to send out an email? Careful with all that, right? Are you going to look up data on the internet for a specific thing? How are you going to collect your data? Now, I should talk about that too. If you want to do secondary data, you have to be very careful with this, okay? So you say, I'm going to look up, the average salary for an NBA player, how it's changed over the last 10 years. Okay. Now that's secondary data you're gonna have to access, because you're not going to be able to ask every NBA player that's ever played for the last 10 years what their salary was. So that's called secondary data. You can use secondary data, but you have to be very, very careful with that. I would prefer you come up with something that's primary data, and I may adjust this later. I think that you all should have primary data for this one. I'll talk to the other grade 9 teacher that's doing this too, so we'll see that for sure. But primary data is data that you actually collect. So you write down the temperature for the day, or you write down, how many people go to the bathroom in the break, or I don't know. That's a bit creepy, but. You know what I mean? Like you're actually writing down numbers or times or people or whatever. And then secondary data is, I'm going to look up the salaries in the NBA for 2010. Okay. Oh, there they are. Okay. Average salary. Good. And I'm going to look up now for 2011. Okay. Good. And so that's secondary data. Someone else has gathered that, but you're accessing it and using it. So I think for this one, because we're doing probability and statistics, it should be primary data. So I'll let you know for sure on that one, but that's the difference between the two. How will I display my data? How will I present my findings? When can I start and when can I collect my data and do my report? If I need help, who will I ask for help? That kind of thing. So I've tried to get a full picture of all the things that you should consider to make a good question, to carry out a good project here for statistics or for some probability experiment. If you are doing this alone, that's fine. You can do this on your own, or you can have a partner. So I would encourage you to work in partners for this, because data collection and analysis and working together is a good thing for you to learn how to do, and it takes a little bit of the load off. It does add a little bit of planning, who's going to do what, how are we going to do this together, because you should do the most of it together. Don't say, you collect all the data, I'll write the report. No. You have to kind of like do this together, okay? You can split up duties a little bit, but it shouldn't be like, you do this half, I'll do this half, we'll throw it together and hand it in. And I won't really know what you did, and you won't really know what I did, but whatever, we'll just get it done and get a mark. Don't do that, you know what I mean? You have to both know about every aspect of your project, so try and do as much together as you can. But if you want to have a partner, that's great. It's good to have partners for projects like this. Any questions at all about this page or anything I've said here about this page? Okay. All right. So we don't have a whole ton of time left in the class, but please think about whether you want to do this on your own or with a partner. Settle on a partner. You guys can choose your own partners. Settle on a partner and start working on this. I want this page to be started on, and you and your partner can work on this together.
Nope.